Welcome, everybody, to this live edition of Tally Book Troubleshooting. Normally, we're bringing you funny stories or entertaining or just good overall feel-good stories about the oil field. Today, we're switching gears. We're trying to go and educate the public. Today, it's going to be corrosion prevention in the midstream space. I hope we don't have to do a whole bunch of troubleshooting to get through all the problems we run into on this one. I'm your host. Welcome. Keith Stelter here, I don't know what I'm trying to do some of these days, just trying to entertain, get my name out there and, contribute to what I think we could do is a lot better as an industry, is a lot better PR, getting people together, work together, and educate each other. Today's episode brought to you as always by Arc Energy. We process your energy. And we also have another great company supporting us today, CDX Energy Services. All your chemical needs, I'll have them on later in the show, ask a couple questions. They're very interested in this topic, corrosion prevention. Looking forward to them to asking our subject matter expert today, Jeremy Ledgewood, on what he feels that he's been in the industry long enough that he feels that he's got some pretty good perspective on how to handle a lot of these corrosion prevention programs and what to get best bang for the buck. Well, I'll let him talk to that later in the show. He's coming up pretty quick. I just wanted to shout out, we need to do this a little bit more as an industry. All these little networking events are great. The shows, we just had the offshore conference in Houston, another great show that's coming up, which I feel is going to try and bring a little bit more interaction between all the energies. Hydrogen, green energy, oil and gas is the LAGCO festival that's coming up later this year in Lafayette, Louisiana. I said festival, you're right. There's going to be music, there's going to be food, and of course, there's going to be all kinds of talk about energy. Looking forward to going there myself, and I will be bringing you, if you can't make it to the show, bringing to you lots of live coverage as well as recorded interviews, people just trying to contribute and do a little bit, get the word out there that oil and gas is not here to hurt anybody. We're here to help and power America and the rest of the world to, a better tomorrow. So let me know where you're watching from. Hopefully somebody is watching out there. I'd appreciate a comment or two. Let me know if this is the first time you're checking out any of these live streams, what you expect. Are you going to ask a question? Throw it out there. Once again, the show brought to you by Arc Energy. We process your energy, and CDX Energy Services. Like I said, I'll be bringing on one of their COOs later on to ask a question. And without any further, I have a banner. Extra banner for LAGCO, October 19th, 21st, Lafayette, Louisiana. Make sure if you don't know about it or what it is, check it out. Oh, few comments already coming in here. Excellent. Mike Jeffers. Oh, in the Permian this week. Well, Mike, you got to reach out. We got to get together here, sir. Well, look at all the way from Saudi Arabia. Paul Moore. Paul, I know you're taking Vibration Technologies out there and doing good things with them. Congratulations, sir. My wife, as always, she's in the background sometimes waiting to pick up the pieces when I fall apart. I'm sure she is at any moment. Oh, who else we got here? I thought I saw something else come in. We got a few more. John King, Houston, Amber, Louisiana. Oh, Corpus Christi checking in. Let's see. What's happening to my scrolling abilities right now? We'll get to some of those comments in a little bit. But without further ado, I'm going to let him do his own real introduction, let you know why you want to listen to Jeremy in the first place. Our subject matter expert on corrosion, Mr. Jeremy Ledgewood. Jeremy, Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions and talk about corrosion.
No, I'm happy to be here, Keith. I sure do appreciate you having me on the show. So my name is Jeremy Ledgewood, work for Audubon Field Solutions. I've got about 18 years experience in the asset integrity and corrosion industry. Man, I've seen a lot of problems, and we fixed a lot of problems, and feel like I can add a little bit and definitely have an opinion on how to help out with corrosion control programs, specifically designed for internal corrosion as cost versus benefit analysis. And I'm excited to be here, ready to take on some
Excellent, sir.
questions.
What, you've been doing this a long time. What has been the biggest challenge, if you could just tidy up in a nutshell, that you think you're going to want to discuss today?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is just, from a midstream standpoint, it's just a dynamic system. It's ever changing, and really the foundation of a good quality optimized program is testing. You've got to have as much analysis as you can. You really need to get as many lab analysis, product analysis, and really make sure that you're injecting the right product.
Yes, sir. Having the right tool for the right job. I think that it doesn't
That's
matter
right.
what industry you're in. You gotta be able to have that. So you have a little presentation here. I assure everybody it's very short. It's just going to show us kind of the scope of what kind of questions we hope to address today. And I will come off the screen and I will let you take it from here, Jeremy. You ready? You're good with that?
Yep, I'm good. Let's do it.
Oops, remove.
So one thing I'd really like to focus on right now is just internal corrosion control. We're going to look at it's going to be a bird's eye view of it. Really answer as many questions as you possibly can. But how do you really develop and optimize a full internal corrosion program? Next slide. So chemical selection is by far the biggest portion of an internal corrosion program. You really have to know exactly what product you're trying to treat. So pulling a good quality analysis and really nailing down what are your corrosive mechanisms, whether it be in the water phase from acid gases or a bacterial standpoint. If you're predominantly gas production and midstream gas, then you need to do a full gas analysis. What is your H2S content? What is your CO2 content? And so that's really the foundation of it, is what products are you needing and what mechanisms are you trying to prevent and control. So from that point, you're going to look at chemical performance. Chemical performance is painstaking, and these programs, they take a long time to develop. If you're looking for a fully customizable program, it's not a me too off the shelf. Just because it works in this area does not mean that it's going to work in that area. So you really need to look at your products from a product selection standpoint. And not all chemicals are the same. You have different activity levels. You have different types of products that are doing different types of things within the system itself. And how do you treat that from a dynamic standpoint when you have production rates going up and going down, and what your flow regimes look like? So really, you really got to nail down exactly what is going on in your system before you start chemical performance. You need to take a look at corrosion inhibitors. Corrosion inhibitors are not biocides. If we didn't have water in our systems at all, you wouldn't have to worry about corrosion, because water is the mechanism that is a catalyst for corrosion rates. So your corrosion inhibitors, what are you trying to block? How are you trying to apply it? Are you filming it? Are you batching it? Are you running pigs? Are you chemically injecting it? Versus your biocides that are very unique and niche in the market, in the fact that, you're really going after microbiology, the things that can, the bugs, the bacteria you hear us all talk about, that accelerates corrosion rates at a very localized area. So you're looking at activity levels of every single one of those. And once you've done your performance testing and you found out that this product line right here, it performs well, or the best out of all of the ones you have available to you, you need to start looking at concentrations. What concentration are you going to be treating at, and making sure that you're maintaining those concentrations. It's really important to remember that these programs, you're really buying yourself insurance. So from a company standpoint, you know, they don't really take internal corrosion as a capex. It's a, if you're doing your job right, then you know, you don't have you don't have anything to look at, right? You don't have failures, you don't have product releases. So that's one thing to take into consideration as you're developing this program. You want benefit and reward, right? Like you want to spend the least amount as you possibly can and get the medicine to where the itch is. I always say that application is everything. Next slide. Application methods. There are multiple ways that you can apply this. This is just two of the treatment methods. So batch treatments, you can either just pump in a batch and let it naturally feed through the pipeline. At that point, you're really focusing on about a 50% holdup. So when we're in the dynamics of these systems, you know, your water is going to fall out of product and it's going to settle into the bottom half. So batch treatments really focus where that water trough is and where that water treatment's moving. You've got to know your system. Like I said, I'm going to be saying that quite a bit. It's very important. So you've got to know your lengths, your diameters, the volume of product going through, because it is imperative to treat at a higher concentration on batch treatments. You want to actually get flow all the way down the pipeline to where you're treating, and it is imperative that you monitor that. You have point, but where the product has actually spent itself, because these products do have shelf life and they can only go so far. The pros and cons of batch treatments is you can batch on a more a longer schedule. You can really look at your system as a whole and identify those areas where you have higher corrosion rates and maybe less corrosion rates. So over in this area, you know, you might be pumping on a quarterly basis on your batch treatments. And then in another area, you might be pumping once a week for a batch treatment. So batch treatment cons, the biggest con for batch treatments is it's so difficult to know exactly from point A to point B what all's taking place through there. So anytime you run a pig, you're going to knock a film off. Anytime you pump a single gallon of product into the line, you really don't know how far that's going to get. So from an application standpoint, it's kind of like playing poker. It's a crapshoot at whatever products it is that you're pumping. So from a continuous injection standpoint, and I really like a continuous injection. They can be atomized into gas phases. They really film out the pipeline nicely. They can be dripped or atomized in, and you can really control your spin and really regulate the concentration that they're going in, and make sure that you're maintaining those corrosion control chemicals. Cons is you got to set a lot of tanks. You know, to really develop a really optimized system, you have to have all of those injection tanks placed where they need to be. It's very important that you install coupons on both batch treatments and continuous injection, and then continue to monitor. You're going to hear me say that a lot. You cannot have enough lab data. You really need to know exactly what's going on in your line at all times. And to kind of wrap everything up, then I think we're going to start taking some phone calls. Optimizing an internal corrosion program absolutely requires that you know the dynamics of your pipeline. You have to know exactly what's going on. You have to know your flow rates. You need to know your product analysis. You need to know exactly what your mechanisms are. And then that doesn't stop in the beginning. You're constantly pulling samples. You need to have qualified individuals out there helping you to interpret all of the data. And you need to be making wise decisions from an optimization standpoint, because anything you do, there's an opposite and equal to effect later on down the road. So going out and just, you know, I mean, you lost a budget, you need whatever it may be, fluctuations in the market, and you're needing to reduce your chemical spend. You really, in order to optimize it, you have to know exactly what you're doing. It's imperative to just not go out there and start reducing chemical rates. And you need to look at that and really evaluate your entire system. So that's in a nutshell. We can get in just as technical as you would like to, if I can answer any questions, and however, whatever you'd like to do, Keith.
That was short and sweet, sir. Kept it to the scope. I know anybody who's tuning in, they probably already have an idea for most of that, but I wanted to make sure that we showed them, the kind of direction we were going into. And with that, our first question is going to go to Chad Frizzell, the COO of CDX Energy Services. I'll bring him on the screen here. I'll let him ask his question in regards to, I think they have a product that can be utilized. I'll bring it, Chad, on. Chad, welcome, sir. The floor is yours. Ask Jeremy. Let everybody know who you are, and then ask Jeremy your question, sir.
Okay, so Chad Frizzell, CEO of CDX Energy Services, have a full line of chemicals. And Keith, thanks for doing this. And Jeremy, thanks for coming on and giving us your expertise in this field. And so my question is this: obviously, we're a chemical company, and we do a lot around corrosion chemicals. So Jeremy, what do you see as the biggest part that chemicals play in a midstream corrosion program?
Chemicals play an imperative role in it. I mean, the foundation of any internal program is absolutely, it's pigging, without a doubt. You have to mechanically scrape the walls of the pipeline. You have to push product through there. But that leaves us with bare steel, right? I mean, that we're knocking off contaminants. We're not looking at pigging from an internal corrosion standpoint as throughput. We're looking at more of removing certain corrosive mechanisms. So it is imperative to come in with a good, solid product. So after you've done your performance testing, you've evaluated that, you need to know exactly what you're pumping into. So from a corrosion inhibitor standpoint, you're actually you're filming out the walls. You're actually blocking the contaminants to getting there. You're buffering certain corrosion mechanisms from taking place. From a biocide standpoint, which I think here, especially in the Permian Basin, bacteria is just an absolute nightmare. The only way to treat bacteria is with chemicals. There's no other way to. Now, yes, you need to. It's in conjunction with a good pigging program, because you're actually sweeping away biofilms from bacteria that have fully colonized and hitting all those low-lying areas. But you're never going to stop that without a good chemical program.
Yeah, and then we have a product, Jeremy, that will help clean that pipe and then help coat that pipe as well. Is that something that you think is vital?
Oh, you've got to have a clean pipeline, and so to be able to have a combo package that actually goes in with a good surfactant in it and a good corrosion inhibitor, possibly an antifoulant that has biocidal tendencies, I think that's imperative to be able to inject into a dynamic flowing system as far as midstream goes.
Okay, gentlemen. So I heard you talking, with the, using that biocide. Is that the number one, corrosion source, or is it things like CO2? Is it H2S? Is it oxygen? Is it the biological component? What would you say is the number one?
That's a good question. I don't know that there is necessarily a number one. I know that bacteria is a very localized corrosion, and so you can have pitting start to propagate at a very rapid rate. So, but CO2 and H2S, the forming of acids as it dissolves into the water, that's right at the next top of the list. So from a midstream standpoint, prior to you hitting refineries and upstream, then I would definitely say it's probably your number one thing that you really need to look at. Bacteria, it seems to just wreak havoc on all of the midstream systems as a whole. They nationwide, I've got the opportunity to work all over everywhere, and it just seems like bacteria, which you have to keep in mind is not naturally occurring in a formation. That is something that we man-made. We actually stick in there with water because we don't treat our water well enough when we're fracking. We don't monitor our water. We're introducing bacteria into our system. So that's one thing to really take a look at is, how can I control bacteria? You can never sterilize the system. It's never going to happen. But how do I combat it, knowing that we're constantly introducing bacteria into our system at a pretty rapid rate? Oxygen is absolutely a catalyst for corrosion rates. It's something that you definitely need to be worried about. But if you're introducing oxygen into your gas or your liquid system, you've got another problem upstream that you need to go look at.
For sure. Chad, with that chemical that you guys have that treats, some biocide, does it also treat any of the other contributing factors to corrosion, or is there combinations of other chemicals that, if you were to mix it so that you're not making multiple trips?
So you can combine a few products together, Keith, to make it better. One product that we have will help with paraffin in the pipeline. It will help. It's not marketed as a biocide because it's not a biocide product, but it will take the food source away from bacteria to the point where they will die off. And then the product will actually coat the pipe and put a kind of a barrier over the pipe to help the pipe stay clean behind it and keep bacteria from sticking to the pipe and start causing corrosion issues with the pipe. So that's one of the things that we can do. And then you can actually take that product and combine it with some other chemical that would help with corrosion or that type of deal. And so from that standpoint, it makes the process easier because you can kind of do 2 or 3 different things with one product.
Excellent. Perfect. Chad, I really appreciate you helping put this together and coming on. And once again, I'll be seeing you soon. Thank you very much for all you've done here.
You're welcome, Keith. Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.
Appreciate you, Chad. Have a good one, buddy.
So now we're on 20 minutes. I don't think that was too bad. Hopefully there's someone out there that tuned in that's got a corrosion question or a situation they'd like either discuss with you or share with you. If you're out there, throw it in the comments. I haven't seen a question yet. Hopefully people are still watching or the comments are still working. Maybe Amber can throw me a bone and just do a random comment just to make sure my scrolling is still working, and let me know what's going on out there. In the meantime, Jeremy, did you ever see, come across a situation where you got there and it was clearly too late for the corrosion program, where they were like, okay, what do we do to fix this? And we're just beyond that at that point?
Yeah, that usually happens when you pull up to a location and you have product leaking out of the line. So it's one thing to really keep in mind that, we can't put metal back on the pipeline, right? So any historical corrosion rates, we can slow corrosion down, but you got to also remember that it is naturally occurring, right? Like there is nothing that we can do to stop Mother Nature from trying to break down what we do from a refining of steel pipelines standpoint, and break it back down into its natural source. And that's really what we're combating. So corrosion cells, whether it be internal or external to the pipeline, that's just a natural phenomenon that takes place. But from an internal standpoint, if I could come up with a product that would actually put metal back onto the pipeline, I tell you what, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. So, it's you have to evaluate your system. Once you reach a point of no return, there's nothing else you can do besides make your repairs. And so
how often does that happen? Like a guy who doesn't deal with a lot of pipelines, I've made my brand new pipeline. When should the corrosion prevention, when should the first chemicals or, plan be implemented? Is it right off the bat? Is it as you're going? Is it 6 months into it? What is it?
That's a great question, actually. And one thing that I really want to tell the operators out there is you need to have somebody qualified within your organization that during inception, I'm talking design of your pipeline system, needs to be working with the engineers that are doing that in order to set up all of your injection points, determine where your coupon needs to be, determine how they can work hand in hand from an internal standpoint, because going back after the fact is probably the industry's biggest downfall, to be honest with you. because there are certain mechanisms out there that can take place within a 28 days to 30 days of inception. And once you, like I said, once you hit that point of no return, there's nothing that you can do. So you need to have a product analysis before you start putting product in your line. You need to know exactly from the very beginning what is taking place and what mechanisms are in the product that you plan on transporting.
We have our first question here from the president of the Oil and Gas Workers Association. Kind of an interesting question. Are we importing low quality steel that necessitates more corrosion controls required?
You know, that's a great question. So I would have to say yes and no to that. So from a metallurgical standpoint, yes, there are certain steels that we're getting. I think that the industry as a whole is kind of identified from those areas where we're getting it from. And yes, they are far more susceptible to higher corrosion rates. It really breaks it down on a metallurgical standpoint. We need to, as an industry, really kind of get better about our material verification, to be honest with you. I mean, yes, we are putting certain steels into our pipeline that are, for lack of better words, they're kind of junk, right? And so
they saved money in the end with the problems that they caused and the extra money you had to spend on the corrosion prevention. Is it really any worth saving?
Nope. No, I would with all confidence, I would say no, it's not worth saving. So you really need to evaluate your program as a whole, and like I said, that starts with inception and design of making sure that you're having the right material for the right product that you're moving.
I think that's the case no matter upstream, midstream, downstream.
Absolutely. Refineries,
you got to have the right tool for the right job, right?
That's
and
right.
It starts with planning. And if you got poor planning, it doesn't matter how good your execution is, it's going to fall the wayside. Still waiting on, hopefully. I thought I had we had about 84 people signed up for this. So
well,
I'm sure
this is
people
pretty
are coming
typical
and
when
going.
you start talking about corrosion, to be honest with you.
It's
the same blank stare that your boss gives you when you start telling him why he's got to spend more money on insurance.
Yes, sir. But, it's when you finally come down to it and you need that insurance, you're sure happy you have it, right?
That's absolutely correct.
I recently, when we moved to Odessa, the real estate agent talked me into buying home warranty. And I was like, And sure enough, our fridge went out. And so we got a brand new fridge for having that home warranty, paid for the whole bill and thing. So it is when you eventually get it that you're happy you have it.
That's right.
Corrosion. So have you ever been called into a situation you talked about when you got chemical leaking on the ground? Where have you been called to investigate anything where the pipeline completely broke down, there was a major spill, and they asked you to investigate, what was ultimately the cause of this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So any failure in your pipeline system needs to have a full failure analysis ran on it. And each different types of corrosion mechanisms leave a different kind of footprint, so to say, or maybe like a fingerprint. You can identify in most circumstances kind of what your mechanism was. That really goes back to product analysis as well. I mean, in the beginning, you should already know exactly what, and it could be a combo of things. I mean, you could have H2S, which, by the way, bacteria's natural byproduct is H2S as well. So you can have naturally occurring H2S and a terrible bacteria issue and increasing your H2S content as well. But CO2, I've worked in certain areas where CO2 really just starts to break down, but each type of mechanism has its own type of footprint. So every time you have a failure, the more analysis that you can have on that failure, the better prevention you can start to develop moving forwards.
So, corrosion prevention program, let's say someone reaches out to you after this and they want some advice. What are some, key points you're going to need to know right off the bat with what they're dealing with? Say it's someone here in West Texas that, hey, we've been struggling. What's the initial information you're going to want to know from them?
I'm going to ask you, number one, what's your pigging program like? well, what type of schedule are you pigging your lines on? We really look at pigging from a standpoint of, flushing out the line for more throughput. But from a corrosion standpoint, like I said before, you have to mechanically scrape your lines. So number one is going to be pigging. I want to know what your pigging program's like. Then number two is, what products are you using? What analysis do you have? And we'll start to review their program. And a lot of companies out there are gonna use a Me Too off the shelf program. Works great in certain areas, maybe not so much. But if you really want to optimize your program, you need to look at everything you have and evaluate it from that standpoint. I'm not saying that you can optimize it on your spend necessarily, but you might be able to move your money around to actually, get the medicine to where the itch is. That's I've always said that, and that's something that one of my old bosses used to say, and that really kind of hits home. You have to get the medicine to where the itch is, right? You've got to evaluate from a dynamic standpoint of your pipeline, really start evaluating the line individually.
Excellent. I got a question here come in. When looking to secure a company that helps with your corrosion control, what advice would you give to those dealing with those types of issues? So we kind of asked what you need to know. What kind of advice should the companies be out there? What are the good ones doing? What are the bad ones doing? I guess maybe not bad ones, but what are the better ones doing to set themselves apart?
It really, in the industry, you got to understand that the corrosion control industry as a whole is ever changing, right? I mean, we're all the time coming up with new products. We're all the time identifying different mechanisms that are taking place that are accelerating corrosion rates. So one thing that if you're out there looking for a chemical provider, I would say right off the bat, you need to talk to them about how well are they going to work with your people in your organization. So one thing you want to steer away from is somebody that really kind of comes in is like, oh, we've been doing the same thing right down the road. It works. I've got however many years in the business, and this is our program, and this is how we do it, which means we're going to pump this much product at every single location. Well, it doesn't make any sense to be pumping 2 gallons of a certain product down a 6-inch line that's a 1/4 mile long versus the same amount of product in a 24-inch line that's 60 miles long, right? So you really need to evaluate who you're working with. You want to have good qualified individuals. And then I would ask them about their technical expertise. They've got to have a technical department that is going to partner with you rather than just, and look, I know a lot of great salesmen out there, and I'm not bashing salesmen, but at the end of the day, they have their salesmen that are going to take care of their accounts, but you want them to be backed up by some technical expertise. You want somebody evaluating the dynamics of your system. You want somebody constantly testing the performance in their product. And then I would really go to say, use a reputable company, somebody that has a lot of expertise and a long track record with that.
Awesome. So we've been discussing pipelines, pigging and stuff. These kind of programs, can they be applied to compressor stations, facilities, that sort of stuff? How does the dynamic change for, places where, that same amount of fluid that's going through that pipeline goes through there?
So from a refinery or a compressor station or just a facility itself, obviously you can't pig through a facility, and you really have to look. That's where chemical performance really comes into play. You've got to know the reaction that's going to take place. I have personally, very early in my career, I've foamed up an entire compressor station before. All these products, they react in a different way, right? So you really, before you start pumping through a refinery or a compressor station, you really need to know dynamics of the facility, and it's imperative for the product that you're pumping. What is this going to do? Is it going to foam up? You're going to try to run foam through a compressor. Is this going to scale? That goes back to product analysis. You need to know all of your scaling tendencies. I've seen tank batteries that are pumping certain product that literally they plug off all of their dump lines with scale, and it completely shuts the battery down. So you've got to know what you're pumping in, and you need to have confidence in that product in order to you know, when you don't have throughput, we're not making any money, right? So when you have downtime, that's you can create a tremendous amount of downtime with the products that you do inject.
Question for Leroy here. Are there any new updates from API in terms of standards or requirements for operators in corrosion control?
Corrosion control. So I can tell you from a PHMSA standpoint, if you have not looked at the new mega rule for the gas gathering, that is definitely something everybody needs to take a stamp to look at, because there are a tremendous amount of lines now being regulated from the federal government standpoint. And that is going to require integrity management programs. That's going to require, you know, turning in those lines, and your chemical program, your coupon analysis, your pigging programs, all of that as an industry as a whole is about to greatly affect our operators. So that's definitely one thing you want to take a look at. Look at the mega rule, look at all of the different changes that have taken place. You know, not trying to give a shameless marketing right here, but that is one thing that Audubon Solutions absolutely does very well. We from a regulatory standpoint, we can go in and help develop programs from gas to liquids to everything in between, that keep us in mind if you got some issues and you need some help along the way.
Are there any standards or requirements out there that you don't agree with right now?
I don't know if I want to answer that question, to be honest.
Ooh, controversial. Okay. No, no.
I don't
Not trying to get you in trouble.
From a standard standpoint, that there's nothing that I can that I disagree with. I think there's a lot of controversy from a chemical injection standpoint, especially revolving around bacteria, and predominantly that it really revolves around not all bacteria is bad bacteria. And that's correct, 100%. I mean, when it comes down to microbiological standpoint, not all bacteria, you have to have bacteria. I mean, our bodies have bacteria. Everything in our environment has bacteria. But there's good bacteria versus bad bacteria. But when you look at it from a midstream standpoint, or really just the industry as a whole, there's no way to really differentiate between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria, because these products are designed to kill bacteria, right? You want to try to somewhat sterilize the system. So there's some colleagues of mine out there that are going to argue that point. I think NACE is really good about really kind of setting standards, and I would say for the most part, I pretty well agree with the industry standards.
Perfect. That's kind of what I wanted to hear. As a guy who's newer to the midstream, I'm sure the system isn't perfect. No system generally is, but sounds like it's pretty good so far, or at least as far as everything else but bacteria is concerned.
Well, when you really look at the amount of pipeline that we have versus the amount of releases that we have, I think all of your midstream companies are really recognizing the fact that, you know, other than third-party damage, internal corrosion is absolutely taking the top rung of the ladder for pipeline system failures. So they're really starting to look at that and bringing in qualified individuals in-house, which I've been saying it for years. That's really what you got to have. You need somebody in-house that is going to be able to make those decisions and not rely necessarily on an outside source to be able to go in and change your program.
I'm not sure if it's a question you can answer or not, but as a guy, like I said, newer to the midstream, this corrosion prevention program, once your pipeline or your facilities are established, how much should that, you know, be as a percentage of your operating cost overall? Is there a target that companies should go for? Is it, something that's actually measurable? Is it something you've experienced in the past where 1% was not enough, 10% was too much? Is there a sweet spot of cost there, or
that's a good question. That's actually a pretty difficult question to ask. So it really comes down to, and I know I sound like a broken record here, but it's what is the quality of the product that you are transporting? So in certain areas, where you have dry gas systems or really clean oil systems or whatever it may be, then your chemical spend is going to be much lower, right? And at that point, it becomes you're going to need a good solid corrosion inhibitor, but you need to back all of that up with data. You know, and you really got to look at. There's so many companies out there that rely on coupon data as the end all be all for their program. But when you look at where we have the locations to place coupon data, is that really where your most corrosive environment is? It's usually not. So it's a tool in your tool belt. It's one thing, but you need to be able to back up your corrosion coupon data with other analysis, right? So back to the question, I would say, I don't know that I can necessarily answer that from a standpoint, but it is definitely something that as the industry as a whole, we need to really look at and evaluate what part of CapEx are we going to apply to internal corrosion and chemical programs, and look at your system and decide that based off of the product analysis that you're transporting.
Well, I guess I would look at more as an OpEx, right? It would be a continuous
OpEx,
program.
yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, going forward as, is it court? What do you for these like inspections, you have a facility, are you inspecting it quarterly, monthly, yearly? What is, what's a good rule of thumb for a guy, just basic guy?
A good rule of
like
thumb
me
starting off, sure. Good rule of thumb starting off is I wouldn't get outside of that quarterly basis. So you definitely want to be pulling samples on a quarterly basis. But you need to be constantly looking for the areas where you need to start to close that window as well. And then it's all about historical data. The more historical data you have, that's actually that you can really build a good case on, you might be able to lengthen that window, and you might need to shorten that window. And that's where fully optimizing your program really comes from, is identifying the areas that I can actually go longer from a pigging standpoint, from an analysis standpoint, from a chemical injection standpoint, and placing that over in areas that you really need to focus on.
So you've done your quarterly inspection, everything checked out well, it's a month later. Are there any other signs besides, that quarterly check that somebody should watch out for?
Pigging.
Yep.
Pigging. What's coming out of your pipeline when you pig it?
How often do you think they should be pigging?
It depends on their product. So if you've got something with iron sulfide, if you've got a lot of paraffin in your line, typically when I set up a chemical or a pigging program, I'm going to usually set it up on a 30-day basis. I try to identify those areas for corrosive mechanisms or even throughput. Paraffin can wreak havoc on a system. And so you might need to close that 30-day window, and you might be able to open that 30-day window up, but it all goes back to knowing your system as well. So pigging is your best way to be able to pull all of your samples. You're going to be pushing solids. Typically you can gather water depending on what type of system you have, but you can set up different traps and liquid systems to be able to collect water as you're pigging it in, pushing it in. So pigging, it's really the foundation of a good internal corrosion program.
Excellent, sir. One last question here from Amber. Are outdated parts causing pipe corrosion? So is there any kind of like older designs or something, or utilizations that might be, causing this to, prematurely corrode?
So that's kind of a hard question to answer when you look at how much older pipe we have in the system, right? And, I've worked over in the New Mexico assets, and I've seen pipes that literally came out of 1928, 32. And though there are segments of those lines that are still in service, but I would say the corrosion industry as a whole over the past 20 years has really started developing into what we are now. So some of the older corrosion methods, it was just kind of, run a pig through it, slap a little bit of this in it, and whatever it may be. And those lines are still out there. So I think that really comes down to, I think our materials have definitely developed different into from the 1940s, 1950s. We definitely got better at material verification and development, but I would say it really has to do with the product of what they're transporting too, you know? So, um, like I said, we introduce bacteria into our system and then we frack into it and then the different systems. And then all of a sudden everything's intercommunicating. And from a bacterial standpoint, we create that. But really taking a look at, all of the acid gases that come into play and all of your corrosive mechanisms, I, I think I'm comfortable with saying that, yes, I do feel like some of our outdated um, steel pipelines are definitely, from a corrosion standpoint, it definitely affects them. And we've really advanced in metallurgy, right? So um, I think you just need to evaluate your system. I think that's how I'll kind of leave that. If you have a good program, then I think you can definitely reduce your corrosion rates enough
Seems
to be
like
able to.
an ongoing theme in this discussion. Lots of
Yes,
evaluation. The more data you have, the more educated answer you're going to be able to give, correct?
that's it. That's right. I mean, from an external corrosion standpoint, you can see everything. You can see what's happening on the outside of your pipeline. You can gather data and build trends. Internally, you can't. I mean, if you could take an X-ray snapshot of what is going on in the interior of the pipeline, then that would be very beneficial, but you can't. So it's really product analysis and seeing what's coming out the other end. The more, it's like anything else, the more information you have, the better educated guess you can come to, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what we're doing.
Well, sir, I don't think we have any more questions here. I really appreciate your time taking the time to do this. I'm sure Autobahn needs you back, solving issues and getting programs up and ready. So once again, thank you very much, sir.
Well, buddy, I sure do appreciate it, Keith. This was a lot of fun.
I found it very educational myself. Like I said, pretty new to the midstream world, and I'm always learning something here. I'm finding it to be pretty interesting, and the people in it are pretty great.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. I'll get you off the screen. You can relax a moment. We'll close up the show here. Want to thank CDX Energy Services for helping put this together. They're big on LinkedIn. Go connect with Chad Frizzell, COO of CDX. Once again, thank you to Jeremy Ledgewood. Appreciate your time. He's big on LinkedIn. Now, we've had to make him a LinkedIn profile to do this. He was not a LinkedIn guy. Can you believe it? Not liking LinkedIn. Just something wrong about that. Reach out to him, connect. You got any other questions you want to take offline? Great guy, willing to help anybody out and answer all your questions. I keep getting messages here off to the side. Everybody messaging after we're closing it down. Isn't that the way it goes? Also want to thank Matt Cody for tuning in. That great question earlier. Check out the Oil and Gas Workers Association. They have a golf tournament coming up. I believe it's June 4th here in Odessa, Texas at Radcliffe Ranch. Admiral Ronnie Jackson is going to be attending that. Check it out. Reach out to Matt Cody. He's big on LinkedIn as well. I want to thank Arc Energy for letting me do these little events and supporting me to do that, and for tuning in. Thank you, Amber, for all the great support and questions. Everybody who commented, my wife, thank you for making sure you held me together all day while I was stressing out doing this. And until next time, everybody, have a great day, great week, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, we are out of here.